So it's great to have with me here today Mike Askew and Robert Wilne, the two series editors of our new maths programme, Mathsbeat. So perhaps we'll just start by asking Mike, you've seen lots of curriculums in your career.
You're saying I'm old, just be bold about it, don't beat around that bush.
Okay, so what's new?
In the new curriculum, I think it's easy to look at the curriculum and think maybe there's nothing new in terms of content, although I think there is, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But I think behind a lot of what's going on at the moment is new thinking about what it is to learn maths. And I came through a system, and Robert's nodding, where the dominant discourse was about different people having different abilities, and you had to match the curriculum to the needs of the individual. We know now, not only from the international studies, but from the psychological research, that apart from the real extremes of the very, very few gifted children and a small percentage of children with genuine learning difficulties, the vast majority of kids can actually learn more maths if they put the effort into it. That there isn't a maths gene. You're not kind of born with different mathematical abilities. It's largely down to your experience. And so, if you've come through a system where the language, the talk has already been about ability grouping and dealing with that, how we now move to this model where I'm expecting more children to master, if you want to use that language, more mathematics, I think that is a shift in thinking and a challenge to practice. And I think the other thing is, we've got the three aims now: fluency, problem solving and reasoning. I think traditionally, again, most teachers will have come through a curriculum and experience of schooling where the focus has been on fluency, it's on learning skills. Those are still important, and it's become a bit of a cliche to talk about 21st century skills, but there's no question that being able to reason about maths and problem solving is what kids are going to need as they grow up, alongside some good estimating and fluency skills. So I think getting that balance of what we've traditionally taught, which is mathematical fluencies and skills, how you integrate reasoning and problem solving into your teaching, I think is new for many teachers, and another challenge that we're currently facing.
And not something they can fall back on their own experience.
That's right.
Because that's not their experience from their own time in the classroom.
Yeah. I mean, you've mentioned mathematical reasoning and problem solving. So Robert, how might a teacher build that into their lesson design?
That's hard, and the default has often been to do a four days of the week on fluency and then put a little bit of reasoning and problem solving in at the end. And so teachers I work with, NQTs, but also quite experienced teachers who want to change their practice and change away from what you're describing, their own prior experience. It's realising you can start with the reason, you can start with problem solving, you can begin the lesson, you can begin the topic with the exploratory question. Partly because that motivates the fluency. Let's consider this problem to solve. We can't solve it yet. Now let's go away and do the fluency work, and then let's come back and finish it off. And so it's really easy to say and it's really hard to do. Jumble the order up. Lesson design, lesson structure shouldn't be fluency, oh, reasoning and problem solving. Because what happens literally or metaphorically is the bell goes and the children never get onto the reasoning or the problem solving. And so what I often saying to teachers is why don't you begin with a reasoning task, why don't you begin with a problem solving task, and they go, great, which task, how do I find that task? And that's where a resource such as this will be so useful.
And I think beginning with a problem or beginning with a reasoning task, again, is a challenge to many teachers' visions of what a good mathematics lesson is about, because not so long ago when we had the numeracy strategy, the dominant model there was I'm going to stand and model what you've got to do for 20 minutes and then the kids go off and practice. In reasoning terms, I can't stand up as a teacher and say, I'm going to show you how to reason, folks, do this, now go off and practice the reasoning I've just shown you to do. I have to give the kids something to reason about. And the big confidence issue there for everybody, I think, is being confident that if I pitch the problem appropriately, my kids, whatever level they're at, can do something with it, can engage with it, and I as the teacher can then build on that to draw out and discuss with them the reasoning they've been engaged in. And that's a very different model of teaching from what a lot of people have experienced themselves, which is very teacher directed, treating learners very much as though they're not really bringing much to the classroom, that it's all about the teacher putting stuff in, Whereas teaching for reasoning and problem solving, I don't know what you think, Robert, it's kind of a drawing out from children of what they can do, and helping them refine it mathematically and modify it and build on it, but starting from where they are.
I talk a lot about what the teacher's trying to do is to catalyse reasoning, like some sort of chemical reaction. So you put the representation or the problem or the image in front of the children, and if you get the right one, sparks fly.
Yeah,
and the reasoning sort of starts to fizz, and then it's the bottling of that, the extracting of that, which is the hard thing to do. That's I've used it enough times with enough teachers, and I've had enough nods in response to that. I think it works.
Yeah.
And right at the beginning you talked about all children being able to achieve in maths and a shift in thinking. So with that in mind, how can a teacher plan for all children to have opportunities to go deeper?
I think it's about there's a quote about teaching which I quite like, and if anybody watching knows where this comes from, please let me know, because I've lost where it was, but I think it comes from Gattegno, who invented Cuisenaire rods, and the quote is something like, teaching is creating a common experience, and then reflecting on that experience, and it's the reflection on the experience that brings out the learning. It's not the experience necessarily on its own. And I think, in the past, one of the things that we've got stressed about in teaching is diversity in classrooms. We put the kids into ability groups to try and reduce the diversity. I think diversity of thinking, particularly when it comes to reasoning and problem solving, is an asset in the classroom. I want different ideas. And so I can deal with the diversity of learners that I've got, of children that I've got, the diversity of experiences that they're bringing, by having a common experience. We're all going to work on this particular problem together. So I kind of level the playing field, not by saying, you're going to get this problem because you're in the high group, and you're going to get this problem because you're in the low attaining group. We're all going to work on this, and some of you will be doing it more sophisticatedly than others. Some of you might be doing it practically, some of you might be acting it out, and all of those are valuable ways of working. And then as a teacher, the metaphor I've got is a kind of weaving together of those, and I've got to pull on the threads that the kids have come up with, and bring the mathematics together and make explicit to them the maths that they've been working on. And then of course the following day, when we return to that, I'm reminding them of that and saying, remember what we did yesterday, so today, rather than all drawing a picture, let's see if we can do it this way. And so it does build, it's not a question of every child kind of just staying at the same level. I'm building it up, but we're creating a common baseline experience that we can draw on for everybody.
Robert, I'd just like to ask you about the new Ofsted framework and what you think how that might have impacted. How that might have affected the teaching and learning of maths, what you've observed.
I think it's all the signals I'm getting are the ones I'm quite pleased with. I mean, the emphasis on the 3 I's, intent, implementation and impact, they seem to be quite sensible things for schools to be thinking about, into their whole provision, for maths leads to be thinking about, for individual teachers to be thinking about, what am I trying to do? How am I doing it, and how do I know that any of it's worked? And that comes down to individual basic lessons. So as what you described just there, the intent of this lesson is that we're all going to have this common experience of thinking about adding on tens. The implementation is I'm going to have a range of representations, a range of manipulatives to do so, and the impact is I'm going to think of the questions, the examples, the non-examples, the misconceptions which and I'm going to explore those and raise those to the surface and see whether they've been addressed. I think actually it's a really good way of thinking about how do you know your lesson is set up in the right way, has the right things in it to make that setup happen, and at the end of it, or at various points during it, it is doing what it should be doing.
And it's interesting how stuff comes around. There's one of my other quotes.
Well, for people like yourself, Mike.
Well,
yes.
Right, okay. But one of my other favourite quotes is, don't worry about educational theories because they're like buses. If you miss one, there'll be another one along again soon. And so I think we sometimes think, I'll sit out mastery because it'll go away and we'll go back to something else. But when we were designing these materials, what was very much in our conversation was some work which was done in the 1970s, which talked about the intended curriculum, the implemented curriculum, and the attained curriculum. And those are three separate things. What I think is going to happen in the classroom isn't what I want to happen, isn't necessarily what's actually going to happen. And again, what actually happens isn't a guarantee of what the learning is going to be. So it's quite prescient that Ofsted have finally kind of caught up with the thinking that was around in the 70s around all of this.
I've just got an image of Amanda Spillman in big flares.
Oh, don't.
Disco hair.
So thinking
Amanda could probably get away with it. I'm not sure Chris Woodhead would have.
So thinking about supporting teachers as well with lots of different levels of experience, you mentioned just a second ago about the thinking behind MathSpeed. So how do you think that's going to support those teachers? Or what is the thinking behind it in order to give teachers support? Perhaps Rob?
Well, I think particularly it's that implementation and impact bit. So I think the implementation, I think the way tasks have been written, the way the materials have been presented, and I keep saying to all the teachers I work with, it's not a script, but hopefully it's a sequence of questions, is a dialogue, which actually, that is the right thing to say next. It is the sensible thing to do next in the lesson. So I'm not following it like a script, but actually it's what I would do in any case. So I think that's the implementation aspect. If you think about, I think the impact is the really hard. How do I know what is happening, and what do I do if, as to use your language, what appears to be the attained curriculum is not the same as the intended curriculum? I mean, how do I get the bus back on the road? And so, speaking specifically about what we've done with MathSpeed, the look out and listen for, and the if so instructions, and instructions not the right word, suggestions. The way we sort of said, this is probably what's going to be happening. If it does, you might want to do this next. This might also be happening. If it does, you might want to kind of steer it back in this direction. I think that's a bit. So when I work with teachers, they often say, I could see it wasn't happening how I wanted it to, but I didn't know what to do next. In the moment, that's really hard. Thinking in the moment, what am I going to do next? And what I really like about it, but when we first sort of sat down and had that blank slate approach to MathSpeed, we sort of thought that's the bit which actually we can make a real difference to the teachers and through them to the kids if we can somehow help them with that.
And one of the things, building on what Robert's saying, that's influenced my thinking over the years is a distinction. And we sometimes kind of just talk about tasks and activities, and I really like the distinction between thinking of a task as what I give the kids to do, and the activity is what they subsequently, is the mathematics they subsequently engage in. So, the task might be something like, from your box of base 10 materials, you can have only 5 bricks, but it doesn't matter if you take 5 ones or 5 tens or 500s or a mix of those. So how many different numbers can you make using exactly 5 bricks? Now that task is quite a straightforward task to set up, but the activity that the kids then engage in mathematically, in terms of seeing that 5 is going to be the smallest number and 500 is going to be the biggest number, and checking if they've got everything between those, putting them in order. What happens if you raise it to 6 bricks you can have? How does that affect the total number you get from a very simple task, which really as a teacher takes no, I don't have to have a worksheet, I don't have to set very much up. I've got a rich lot of mathematical activity that children can be engaged in. They're all on the same, they're getting this common experience of exploring what they can do with 5 bricks. But I can say to Robert, you go off now and see if you can do it with 6, and Joe, you've now gone to 8 bricks, so is there a pattern here? Can you predict if I gave you 9? So the richness, the depth of understanding comes from attending not to what I'm initially asking the kids to do, but where it can go in terms of the mathematical activity as they engage with it.
And that's what I think the look out and listen for, the assessment for learning we've put in MathSpeed really helps with, because that's, if you've got essentially 30 different children playing around with 5 bricks in different ways, that's quite hard to think in the moment necessarily what am I going to do with each one. But having that sort of, for some children you might say, okay, now you can only use 2 columns of the place value chart. How does that change things? For some you might say you have to have 2 of the columns have to have the same number, and how does that change? And actually, quite oddly, putting constraints in makes problems often quite harder, I find, or richer.
So you mentioned about the time it takes and the understanding to kind of react in the moment, and we hear a lot about teacher workload, and it's just from your work with teachers, what are the things do you think would help to support with reducing workload? Robert?
I really it kind of breaks my heart when I see that teachers have clearly been burning the midnight oil, downloading the midnight printing, and what they've produced doesn't have that through line, that consistency, doesn't have those opportunities for the rich development that we've just been talking about, and that's where they have given themselves a heavy workload and it's been to no effect. So I think what in terms of teaching mathematics, what reduces teacher workload is saying here is a well thought out task. Here are some things you might want to be looking at whilst this task is happening, as the task is turning into the activity. Now you as the professional, you as the experienced individual, you as the creative teacher, bring this to life. And it's a bit like cooking. So what do you do if you want to make something? You open a recipe book, you buy a magazine, you think, okay, in fact, I'm going to think about these things, I'm not going to worry about that, I'm going to look at this. What I'm going to do though is I'm going to make it happen. I've got to go and get the ingredients. I've got to bring it all to life in the kitchen. But I don't have to start right from the very beginning. What on earth are we going to eat? I'm going to eat this. I'm going to think how to make it lovely. And I think that's what we can do through MathsBeat, is sort of say, here's the dish. Here are some ingredients. Over to you, chef, to make it into a nourishing experience for the children. We're not delivering a ready meal. But we are saying, here are the bits and pieces that you need, and if you bring your professionalism, your intelligence, your training to make this live, what it'll be will be really successful.
Yeah. And I think it's also thinking, I'm not sure if the meal metaphor
might come to an end.
Might come to an end.
I'll wheel it out.
Wheel it out. Tail off. Is it on the trolley? That it's helpful. I think it's helpful to start to think about planning as a series of tasks you're going to offer the children, rather than a series of lessons. So we've designed the materials that we hope are going to last about a week. But it's, as I was trying to illustrate with that example, if you get a rich task, that can take you 2 or 3 lessons because you're going into depth with it. So it's not a question of Monday's lesson's closed, so suddenly I've got to plan another new thing. I think one of the problems we sometimes have with maths teaching is it's become very fragmented. That if you say to kids, what did you do last Monday, it might be, well, we did page 25, and we want kids, I think, to be able to say, oh, we worked on that problem with the bricks. So there's a kind of collective memory that you're building in the class of things you've done that you can carry on building and growing and developing. And I think all of that helps with the workload, because I'm not kind of forever saying, what's the new thing? What's the next thing I've got to come up? Now that they've done that, it's like, okay, we've got this, we've had this common experience, we've had this activity we're engaged in. How can I build on that? How can I develop it? And we're giving guidelines in the materials as to kind of say, well, your kids might have got here. Maybe you need to go off sideways for a while and do some more stuff around that if you think they haven't kind of really got to grips with it yet, or maybe you're ready to move on. So I've got a map metaphor in my mind that I want to get over there with my learners, but it's not like a railroad track that we're on that page 26, page 27, page 28 will get me there. It's like, oh, maybe we just need to go and explore this over here before we come back to that path.
Thank you.
I mean, perhaps it might be worth saying, you could listen to that and sort of go, but are we actually going to cover the national curriculum? Am I going to hit an objective? What about my senior leader who wants some data from me?
Yeah.
And so I think, again, from a workload point of view, what we have spent our time doing is chopping up the national curriculum and the objective statements and making sure that there is the coverage you need across the year. but the flow through them, the progression through them, the connectivity through them has been well thought out. There is absolutely no value in 2 teachers in one school, 50 teachers in one borough, 100,000 teachers in one city doing that piece of work themselves individually. That's what we can do to reduce that back office workload, so that what they can focus on is what does this look like in my class with my kids,
and how we make links across different. What are sometimes perceived as different aspects of maths, but are actually just the same underlying ideas. So, fractions really are largely from doing division work. That if we've got 6 biscuits to share between the 3 of us, we're going to get 2 each. That's division. If we've got 1 biscuit to share between the 3 of us, and we want a fair share each, that's a third. So I'm doing division, but I'm also moved into fractions. So
if it's 1 biscuit and 3 of us, look over there, you 2. Is that a lion? Gosh.
Yes, and it's coming after you with your biscuit. And so we're looking for how there's kind of synergies between different aspects of the curriculum, and I think that's another way of reducing the pressure and the workload issue, which is for me, and I think for Robert, there are a few core big ideas that glue maths together.
And that ties in with the research which you showed me about interleaving and revisiting ideas. Because what we don't want is relentlessly kind of doing addition again and again and again. But if we can make sure the measurement activities link back to place value, then you get the new context, but still exploring the same concepts.
Yeah.
Thank you both. We could talk all afternoon. Maybe have to have another one.
We're going to go chasing biscuits.
Yes. But thank you so much for your time, your thoughts. Lots of food for thought there. And thank you, Mike. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.